Alrighty then, this is a redo of a video I posted and then took down before it got released, mostly because I found out I'd made a bit of a mistake in one of the repairs I did. This is for the JVC DR-MH30SU hard disk drive recorder, circa 2005, which I paid a ridiculous amount of money for. I think it was like $550 from Crutchfield. It was a very good unit as long as it worked, but just right before or right about the time that everything went digital, the unit started having problems. It got the infamous loading display where you would turn it on after a power outage, and the front would flash loading for a very long time. It would eventually load up, and but it just kept getting longer and longer, and then it just wouldn't do it at all. So I took this thing and put it in storage and kind of forgot about it, and recently I was going through storage and found it and pulled it out and decided to see if I could get it working. In the time between when I put this in storage and now, I got into working on some electronics, or got into electronics a bit, and actually had a chance of fixing this. So basically what I did was I turned this thing on, and with the thermal imager started checking it, and I found that obviously if you look here you'll see there's some scorch marks, and these areas were overheating, but it's not really the issue. It wasn't really the overheating that was the issue. The number one problem I found was that almost every electrolytic capacitor on this board was bad or failing. The only ones that appear to be any good are these running up the middle, this one, and these three. I took a representative of these each out of circuit and tested them, and they all tested fine, but every single one of these I had to replace. When I pulled them out, I checked them, and they all had very high ESR values. They were the brand was Lennon, I believe, and unfortunately some of the ones I replaced them with are Lennon, but they're newer and they'll have to do. Or the other issue I found even after I got it working was that this unit, the power supply, is really not power. It doesn't put out enough power to power the hard drive, and the hard drive connector is here, and it actually is supposed to plug in here, and then the CD-ROM or DVD drive is supposed to plug in here. But what I found was with the DVD plugged in here, this thing still has problems booting. It will only boot like 50% of the time. But by moving this connector over to here, this side of the power supply seems to be a bit more robust than this one. And I don't know if I'll be using this very often, but I wanted it to be able to work. And so this capacitor here, which was a very tiny, looked like a resistor, was measuring open. I initially misread this as a resistor and replaced it with a resistor, and then everything started working better. But I figured out it was wrong and replaced it with a capacitor. That's why I had to redo the whole video. So really, the issue with this board is that the power supply is just barely got enough power for the hard drive, and I think as the hard drive ages, it maybe draws a little more power, and the board can't handle it. It claims, the hard drive claims, it only draws 590 milliamps at 5 volts and 590 milliamps at 12 volts, but that's kind of a lie. At boot up, it takes almost an amp. Anyways, it's not required to power either of these things from this board. The startup for this unit basically works as such, where when you first power it up, it turns the hard drive on, which it is irrelevant to whether there's power coming from this board. It's controlled in software. The hard drive powers up, goes through a bit of a boot process that takes about 30-35 seconds, and then it goes to standby. And then when you press the power button, it then turns the hard drive back on, and you do whatever you need. So you can actually power this from any hard drive power supply, +5 and +12 volts. In fact, I did that when I was testing it, and it worked fine. So as a workaround, if everything else powers up on this on your device, but you can't get it to the loading screen to go past, you can always just, if you don't feel like you can repair these, you can get yourself an external hard drive power supply, or I don't know, there's stuff out there. Power the hard drive, power the DVD burner externally, and the unit will work just fine. So in a second here, I'm going to move everything around, show you the boot process for a cold start, and we'll see what goes on with that. Okay, you should be able to see the front display, and what I'm going to do is turn power on to the device, and it should take about 35 seconds to power on. So here goes. Okay, so that was a normal first power up. Took about 40 seconds or thereabouts. I'll put the time in the... And here's what happens when you then take it out of standby. And there you are, we're out of standby. And then I'll show you that it's working. I've got this hooked up to my computer. I don't have a standard TV to hook this to. And there you go. you can see that it works. I'll turn it off. And turn it on. And that's one fixed hard disk drive recorder.